Real quick, I'm going to skip the hello everybody subscribe thing. This is a call to action. Go over to my main channel and watch episode 1 of my Dallas Mavericks, my NBA series, and then go over to my 2K channel that's just called Rusty and watch episode 2. I had to delete episode 1 and 2 yesterday when I uploaded them because the audio was messed up. Had I realized that before uploading it, I could have avoided this whole problem, but both of those videos are not doing as well as I would like just because of the fact that they were up for so long before I deleted them, and click-through rate and all that kind of stuff. So please go watch those videos, even if you do not enjoy 2K content. These types of videos are more in-depth and analytical, and it's like looking at it like I'm actually a general manager of a team trying to make real decisions and not just trading for Kevin Durant on episode 2, if you know what I mean. Realistic and such. So please go watch those. I really enjoy doing them, and I kind of fucking butchered the release of those. So go watch those. Anyways, real quick, I should acknowledge, I understand my Air Forces are dirty. I will clean them soon. I decided to walk around in freshly cut wet grass with them, and that was a huge mistake. Anyways, interestingly enough, the two pieces of news today that I'm talking about, and it's first of all nice to have NBA news, but second of all, one of them actually pertains to the Mavs series, because in episode 1 of my Dallas Mavericks series, I make, spoiler alert, a trade for John Wall and a salary cap move to get Kristaps Porzingis off of the books because his contract is a year longer. But John Wall is now in the news because he and the Rockets have pretty much mutually agreed, son of a bitch, I just took it off of my timeline, have mutually agreed that they should part ways, and they have agreed that John Wall will not play this season. He will go to training camp, but he will not play games for them, and they have mutually agreed to work together to find a new home. This is according to Sham, so it's an official source. I mean, it completely makes sense for both sides of this. Well, I mean, more so the Rockets than it does John, but John is not really pertinent to their future. Christian Wood, Kevin Porter Jr., Jalen Green, especially the last two guys who are both guards who need opportunity. John is just going to take away from that, so it makes sense for them not to really want to look to give him much playing time, a lot of shots, because he's one to take shots. So Houston doesn't really want to play John Wall, and I think John Wall understands that, and he doesn't really want to play in a losing situation, even though I think the Rockets could actually be semi-decent next year, depending on how good Jalen Green is. But regardless, he's definitely not really fitting with Houston right now. The problem with that is, while I do believe John Wall can be a solid fit with a couple of NBA teams, because John Wall's not bad, he's not worth $47 million, which is what his player option is after this season, which he's obviously going to be taking. So for that reason, trading him is no easy feat, and that is really the topic of discussion now. It's like, how do you move on from this contract? Now, the thing is, we have seen time and time again over the last couple of off seasons that these untradeable contracts are apparently pretty fucking tradable. Russell Westbrook traded twice. Fucking Chris Paul. Obviously now he was worth the money he was getting, but it wasn't the perception at the time. He was traded. Al Horford, he got traded. Like, these crazy big contracts. Kemba Walker. These contracts that are not worth, interestingly, all three of those pertain to OKC, the last three. But regardless, it is possible to trade these bad contracts. The thing is, you just can't expect to get as much as the player is worth individually. And all of those players are good players. They're just overpaid. In the case of John Wall, he is the most overpaid of all of those names by far. He has, if not the biggest, one of the biggest per year salaries going into the next 2 years. But the one positive spin you can put on that is that John is just being paid for the next 2 years, and there are a handful of teams that are probably not going to be all that invested in free agency over the next 2 years. So like cap flexibility isn't that important for them going into those two off seasons. The example I can give of the trade that I did in the Maverick series, though I would be a lot more hesitant to do this in real life than I am in 2K, because it's a 2K series and the consequences are far less severe because it's 2K and it's not real life. As much as I like to act like it is, I also know in my head that like things are going to work out because it's a fucking 2K series. But the Dallas Mavericks, Kristaps Porzingis, his contract is also terrible, and they want to move on from him, although it seems like they're just going to be forced to stick around with him, and hopefully he turns his career around. But while his contract is terrible, it's a 3-year deal, while John's is essentially a 2-year deal because he's taking his player option, and Kristaps is also a 2+1, but he's taking his player option. So would you rather have the 2-year deal that's bad or the 3-year deal that's bad? Maybe that swap makes sense. Maybe you give them like Josh Green, so it's like, hey, I understand you're taking on a year of $30 million in salary, but you are getting a young player that has potential, although not a substantial young player. It's just a young player that there's something there. And maybe their 2026 first round pick, because that's the only one they can trade because of the Stepien rule. But regardless, that could be the mindset of, we get a bad contract, sure, but it's shorter term. The problem with that, though, is there's really no other examples of that around the league, as far as I'm aware, of just atrociously bad contracts that are 3 or 4 years. Maybe you could make an argument for the Ben Simmons contract, but I don't think he's that overpaid for what he brings to the table, probably by just like $6 or $7 million, which is still a lot, but it's not crazy. And there's no real other contract that I can look at. I always do this where I just pull up the teams just so I try not to blank on the teams, even though I manage to do that all the time and manage to blank on players all the time, which is part of the reason why I discontinued doing the top 10 position videos, because I was like, I can't keep forgetting people and having the comment section roast me because I just miss shit all the time. But like, there's no other contract in the league that is a long-term, terrible contract on par with John Wall. So that Mavericks move is one thing I can think of. The other is it's a team that has a compilation of a couple of contracts, and they're looking for what John Wall can bring to the table. The Clippers is the kind of obvious one, but it's less obvious now that Reggie Jackson is actually really good. But you could do, what's his fucking name? Eric Bledsoe's contract, Luke Kennard's contract, and then like Serge Ibaka's contract. And I think other than Luke Kennard, all of those expire relatively soon. So that would be giving the Rockets some cap relief and John Wall no longer on the roster. And you're a little okay losing Serge Ibaka just by the fact that Zubac is good and they were good without Serge last year, even though it'd be nice to see Serge with that team. And then you get a point guard who is a good playmaker, a relatively good defender, and somewhat of a scorer. The biggest problem with John Wall right now is that he is, and this is a problem he's had throughout his career, is he's always shot the ball just a little bit too much for what his actual capability is. John is a really good slasher, really good at getting to the basket, but he insists on taking a high volume of jump shots when he's just simply not good at them. And I don't just mean three-pointers. I also mean mid-range shots. John is in the school of players who take so many mid-range shots that it convinces people that he's good at mid-range shots, when in actuality he's not. He's like 35% from there for most of his career. I believe he was even worse than that last year. So John is not a good mid-range shooter just because he takes a high volume of them. I've seen so many people say like Andrew Wiggins is a good mid-range shooter, and it kind of drives me insane because in fact, no, his statistics show that he shoots poorly from those areas. Just because you take a high volume of mid-range shots does not mean you are a good mid-range shooter. People just don't track mid-range percentages nearly as much as they do three-point percentages. No one would call Russell Westbrook a good three-point shooter because he takes 6 of them a game. Anyways, short rant over. If John could just go to a team that's like a contender and say, hey, I'm going to drive to the basket, I'm going to shoot open threes, and I'll take 1 or 2, maybe 3 mid-range pull-ups a game max, and focus on defense because he took a big step down post-Achilles tear defensively, which is fair, but regardless, more of a focus on defense, more of a focus on his playmaking where he's still great, and be like in 17 point per game score on better than -5 true shooting percentage, which is what he has been for most of his career, but his other aspects, his defense and his playmaking, were even further elevated. His slashing was better because he was more of an athlete than he is now, and he was taking a higher volume of shots while having the lower efficiency, so I don't know. Regardless, efficiency has always been a problem with John Wall, and he's always needed to shoot the ball a little bit less. And especially now at this point in his career, if he wants to be a starter, if he wants to be the key part of a good team, reducing his shots and just focusing on defense and playmaking, I think if he can do that, he can be a quality starting point guard. The problem is, though, his contract. Now, the last bit of NBA news, because I can't really think of much else to say about the subject. It's not going to be easy to trade him, but the Clippers deal and maybe the Mavericks make some sense to me. Nothing else that I can really think of. Next move is Aaron Gordon got an extension. Because I've been talking about this move so long, I'm going to keep this relatively brief. The Nuggets paid him $23 million a year. Roughly, that's what the salary breaks down to. And I think that's perfectly valid. I don't know why everyone's freaking out about the contract. Like, every time a contract like this in particular happens, I really question what NBA fans think players' values are, because Aaron Gordon is a really good starter that makes a lot of sense within Denver's system, and a really good starter is worth about $20 million. Now, I think he got overpaid a little bit. Like, I'd say Aaron's probably worth $18, $19 million a year, and he's making 23. It's not a big deal. $5 to $4 million more than what you were probably worth is not that big of a deal. It's really not. Like, it's the difference of maybe one quality role player that wouldn't even get that many minutes in the playoffs. Like, if we got to look at the salary of, okay, how much is this player being overpaid? And if so, how valuable is that percentage of the cap to where you're really going to freak out and say it's a bad move? Because if, like, $5 million is what it is, and that's such a small percentage of your cap space, that's really not a noteworthy overpay. Now, if you're paying John Wall $44 million and he's worth, like, maybe 20, that's a different conversation. But Aaron Gordon is worth like $18 million and he's being paid 23. I'm not freaking out about $5 million per year more than he's really actively worth. So I think people are overreacting with that move. I think it's a fine move. Aaron Gordon specifically fits so good with Denver, and I think Denver, when they get healthy, are a contending level team. Jamal Murray is really important to that team. Michael Porter is probably going to take another stride in his offensive game after being phenomenal last year. Aaron Gordon clearly showed to be an impactful player in that team in the minutes that he got. Aaron Gordon, good with Denver, barely overpaid, so I'm not freaking out, and I think it's fine. And the John Wall thing, that's going to be difficult, but if you manage to pull it off, good on you. You might have to, like, in reality, you might just have to sit on this contract and maybe buy him out in his last year with his player option, or trade him to a team that you give them a first-round pick, which if you're Houston at this point, giving someone a first-round pick is rough, but maybe it's like a 2027 first-round pick or some shit. But regardless, yeah, that's my thoughts on both of those situations. Again, please go check out those My NBA videos, because I really enjoy doing those types of videos, and I kind of hate how much I fucked up the promotion of that series. And look, I understand it is my fuck up, but regardless, I would like to mitigate how much of a negative that ends up being. And again, even if you don't like 2K stuff, I think you would enjoy that type of series. I typically don't enjoy 2K content, but when a Funky Diabetic did stuff similar back in the day, I ate that shit up because it was actual basketball points, it was actual semi-analysis, it was looking at the game as actual basketball and not 2K. So yeah, anyways, that is it. Thank you if you do that, and goodbye.